Hello, everyone. This is our 9th town hall meeting. Obviously, with recent events of the last week or so, this will be a little bit different. We'll go beyond COVID. I want to introduce my guests in screen order, just to make it easier for me. We have Clavella Spruill, our Public Safety Director, Bob Vornlacher, the Township Manager, Dr. John Ravalli, the Superintendent. From our press is Bill Bowman. We have Councilwoman Crystal Pruitt and Chanel Robinson, Freeholder Director, Malik Lyons from Tapped Into, and PJ Parker from the Franklin Reporter. I guess I'll just, you know what? I would like Freeholder Director Robinson to head us off on this.
Okay, and before you do, Chanel, let me, Freeholder Director, let me just remind those listening on Facebook that to hold questions and to enter them into the comments section once they're called for. So after we go, unless we have any special breaks where we want to do that, we're going to get through the updates. We're going to go to the press for questions, and then we'll open it up for questions in the comments on Facebook. Freeholder Director, I apologize. Go ahead.
That's quite all right. Thank you, Mayor Kramer, and thank you, Michael. Good evening, everyone. Just to give you an update with regards to COVID, we will continue with testing through the month of June. Our numbers of attendees or appointments have significantly dropped. As of today's testing site, we tested a little bit over 30 people. But yesterday, we had a mobile site in Franklin, a pop-up clinic, which I hear was a success. We tested a total of 72 people. That include those that had an appointment and those that came through as a walk-up. So there definitely is a need for more pop-up sites throughout the county to our most vulnerable communities. We do recognize that, and we'll continue to do all that we can to make sure that access to testing is made available to our residents. I was actually on a call today with 9 other counties that did not receive stimulus funding as part of the CARES Act because we did not meet the threshold of a population of 500,000 plus. However, there will be efforts made, and I do not have any details at this point and at this time, to have additional or expanding of testing. I've also given direction to the senior team to look into the pharmacies throughout the communities that are testing or that testing is available so that we can provide that information to our residents. So more to come on that. Are we just sticking to COVID or are we doing non-COVID as well? Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So that's all that I have on the COVID front. As we move to onto our next normal is the new phrase. And so as we have been experiencing and seeing the protests in light of the death and murder of George Floyd and others, this has been a decades and century-old problem where people of color have not been given just due. The narrative has been written for us, and it's time to take our rightful place as we continue to write our own narrative. And while all lives matter, and I encourage everyone to maintain civility, all lives matter. But the lives of those people of color have been snuffed out and exponentially extinguished at the hands of law enforcement and others who merely do it for recreation, game, and do not like people of color based on the color of their skin. And it's time for all of us to stand up, speak and speak out against the injustice. And in the words of the late Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., injustice anywhere is, and I'm paraphrasing because right now my train of thought is everywhere. As a mother of 2 Black sons, my heart goes out. And it goes without saying that there's more that we have to do. It's not just about law enforcement. There's good and bad in every industry. There's good and bad at every level. But the responsibility is on all of us on so many levels: education, financial equity. And people like to throw around the phrase of equality, but it's about equality and equity at every level. I could just share with you an experience long ago in the public school system where one of my 3 children came home with a paper, and the paper had a B on it. I literally sent that paper back to school with my signature and initials, and I had corrections on that paper. And to me, as a parent, it was not a B paper. So that's the type of systemic and institutional type of injustice that's been done to people of color. That's just one example. And so I sent the paper back, and my children often didn't like showing me their papers when they had to write them, because I would crumple it up and make them write it again. And often they would say, well, the teacher doesn't look at that. The teacher doesn't care about that. Well, you should care. So for me to, as a parent, to have that conversation, it's disheartening. And then I made the corrections and sent it back, and asked for an opportunity for them to rewrite it with the corrections and to be graded as such. But for years, to think of a Black male child, milestone in life is making it to the age of 18 without a record, or without dying, or without being in prison or incarcerated. Then the next milestone, making it to the age of 21. The next milestone of making it through a college education and onto a successful job. The numbers are slim and dismal in comparison to our counterparts. So while the protests and the march and the rallies are good, we have work to do legislatively, on the financial front, on the front of home ownership, so many levels. So people often ask, well, what are you gonna do? What I've always been doing. I've been a leader. I've been an advocate. I've been a voice, and I will continue to do so. I just ask that my colleagues stand with me, stand up for people of color. And as it was said, I believe it was Terrence Floyd, the brother of George Floyd, who said, this, our people, the people, not your people, not my people, but the people. That means everyone. And I've often said, and I said this on my mayor's call the other day, nobody cared about the color of my skin when I was serving in the military. Right now, this is a time that work has to be done, and we have to be the ones to do it. Be the change we want to see, in the words of Gandhi. And if that change is not for all people at all times, then people need to either lead, or, in the phrase, get the hell out the way, because there's work to do. And I'm committed to doing the work. So thank you.
Freeholder Director, you have a vigil coming up, a virtual vigil?
I do. I was being invited by Dr. Chowdhury of the ICANN Foundation, and I will get the information over to Michael and to others. It is this Sunday from 3 to 4. I'm just looking up the information now, or you can come back to me before we get off the air and I will provide that information.
I'm actually on the planning committee, so if you have questions, I can field them too.
So
if you have them to give out here, then Jessica Levin Sullivan is annotating the Facebook feed, and she can put information there as well, or look it up for you, whatever you need.
thank you, Jessica. And if you can email that information to me, Crystal, then I can post it on my Facebook page. Thank you, Freeholder Director.
Are we going to go in typical order, Mr. Mayor?
Pardon?
Are we going in regular order?
Yes.
Okay, so then we would move to, do you have a update yourself, or do you want to move to Township Manager?
I'll go last.
Okay, Township Manager Bob Warnlocker.
I think that actually most of what I would have discussed, the Freeholder Director covered. We had a test site at the Franklin Middle School We had over 70 people tested. The majority of those people were from Franklin Township, and a large number of them were either without insurance or without a primary care provider. So it was that part of our population that we were targeting, and I think that we were successful in getting tests for people who might not otherwise be tested. And we're continuing now to evaluate a second test site, and not test site, I shouldn't say, the same site, but a second date. There are a number of different ways that we can go about doing that. We can do it the way we did it yesterday with Zufall, and there's also private facilities who have offered to run a test site in Franklin Township with the township, and we're exploring that as well. And I think that you should all look to our website and any social media blasts that we put out as to when that might be. We also are working with our, we've started now to receive inquiries from township restaurants about outdoor dining. And our economic development director is working with them to get that process started with them now that we got guidance from the state of New Jersey. I got mine late last night, and we distributed it to, and are distributing it to restaurants. There's going to be an effort by the Economic Development Office to get out and personally distribute the executive order and our township council resolution opening up outdoor dining in areas that it might not have otherwise been allowed in the past. So that effort is underway, and Vince Dominack, our director, is working with some people from the zoning department to get that word out to all of our restaurants. And that's kind of where we're going right now. So that's what I'll talk about today.
The outside restaurants open on the 16th, is that right?
15th, 6 a.m. on the 15th.
Very good. Mr. Steinbrook? You're muted. You're still muted.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you to Township Manager. And now we're going to move to Director of Public Safety, Quavella Spruill.
Good evening, everyone. So this is a little over a month for me. And I must say that we went from COVID to the murder in Minneapolis to the demonstrations in Franklin. And I must say, we haven't skipped a beat. We're just moving along, trying to get ready for different changes in the community once things open up. We're excited about trying to begin a community program with community policing events. I don't know what that's going to look like post-COVID, but we're excited about doing that. Today's march was, I would say, very profound, very epic. I felt the emotion, I felt the pain of our residents today, and through the other march as well. But, you know, we stand in solidarity with our officers, with our community, the officers and myself. And, you know, I think today some emotions came out and some of the participants were emotional toward us, but we dealt with that. We talked to them. But I think we have to keep this going. Just as the freeholder said, we have work to do. This is not, you know, a show. And that's what I don't want it to become. I want everyone to realize that the nation, the state of New Jersey, the county of Somerset, the township of Franklin, we can't stop here. You know, there is more things that we can do. And I thank them, because I think the youth, by protesting, they are opening up the dialogue. They are making others recognize the injustices that occur. And I feel like we have to stand for something. You know, our community is hurting, and we have to recognize that, and we have to do something. And I expect the men and women in the police department to do that, to stand with the community and help them get through this. And when we move forward, do things. Don't just stop now. Once this goes away and it fades, and, you know, in Minneapolis, they're convicted, that it doesn't stop there. We have to keep going.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you, Director. I'm going to move to Councilwoman Pruitt. If you want to unmute yourself.
Hi, and good evening, everyone. This is a longtime listener, first time caller, I guess, the town halls. I definitely want to touch a little bit on what Director Sproul said, and also kind of tie that back into the current pandemic. I was able to participate on Sunday's protest, and it was really profound, and it was really unifying, because out of the pain there was still a sense of community. But it's really important that we hold on to this moment and we keep working on it. We don't need to continuously have, incidents like this. We need to address them, and we all have a responsibility to do so on every level of government. The culture starts at the top of a police department. So I'm really proud of the work that our township has done in hiring Director Sproul and beginning to change that culture. And I anticipate opportunities for us to continue to really, really dig into the community and really reinforce that bond and that relationship. So I'm very heartened to hear that, even though we're still in the midst of this pandemic, we're thinking about community policing and community engagement. And prior to COVID, that's very much my wheelhouse. It still is, even though it's from a distance. So I look forward to that work being done and continuing to assist in any way possible. But the COVID related thing is, I think it's also really important for our residents to understand that we're still in a public health emergency. So while I participated in Sunday's march, I made the decision, partly out of just my own anxiety and to be safe than sorry, to quarantine myself, because I was in a large crowd. And even though I was wearing my mask and I was social distancing, the one thing that we've been told when we've been dealing with COVID-19 is to stay away from other people. And, going out there and standing in solidarity as an African-American woman protesting against the institutionalized and systemic racism in our country that results in the deaths of, George Floyd and Breonna Taylor and the many other people. That was really important to show up for, but we also have to be aware that, this virus is still out there. We are flattening the curve, but it's still very much present. For everyone that is going out, just be as safe as possible. If you can, if you're able, quarantine for the 14 days. If you can get tested, do so. Obviously, the Freeholder Director discussed testing, but there are private testing facilities. Rite Aid is one of them. So just to protect yourself and do what you can. But I'm really heartened to see the work that's being done in our community to make sure that everything that's happening on the national stage isn't happening here. And that's what I came into this role really wanting to focus on. So everything that happened this past week did hit me really hard, but it makes me feel good that I live in this township and we're willing to talk about that and have those conversations. And, as the Freeholder Director said, please keep us accountable. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman Pruitt. We're going to move to get a report from the schools. I think Principal Schmidt was not able to join us tonight, but we do have Dr. Ravalli, Superintendent of Franklin Public Schools. So Dr. Ravalli, if you want to give us an update and maybe a little bit on graduation, I suppose.
Absolutely. Thank you, Michael. First, as the director and freeholder said, we have some work to do with regard to equity. And as a district, we pledge to continue to work hard to ensure our Black and Brown students, along with all our students, regardless of race, religion, gender, or ability, are provided with a high quality education and every opportunity that they deserve. And we'll continue to do that. We have work to do, and we pledge as school leaders that we will continue to do the important work that will help to bring those opportunities about. I do have an update about graduation. As you know, graduation guidance has been coming out in drips and drabs and then changing, so forth and so on. But we've got to the point where we do have a pretty solid plan, and our graduation on graduation day, which is June 23rd for us, will be a virtual graduation, but it will be followed by, and we're still developing that plan, and we're going to get it to our local public health officials. We're going to get it to the police director as soon as we're done with all the details. But we also have to submit it to the Department of Education. But our plan includes smaller gatherings so that we can honor graduates. It won't be the typical speeches and those types of things. It'll be a short address by the principal. It'll be calling of names. It'll be students receiving diplomas. It'll be pomp and circumstance on the way in, a recessional on the way out, opportunity for pictures when kids are on the field for parents. And we're going to arrange the format a little bit differently so kids are facing parents. And in the background will be Home of the Warriors. So a lot of thought has gone on into this. Mr. Schmiel and his team of vice principals, his team of deans, they've done a tremendous job shifting gears, making plans, and making this possible, we hope, for students. So we still have some work to do. We're still waiting for numbers. You know, we understand we're moving into phase 2. We understand that numbers may change with gathering sizes and those types of things. So we're waiting not till the last possible minute, but certainly to put the final details of our plan together at a point when we're going to be able to maximize the occupancy for the benefit of our families. But it will be limited just the same, and it will happen in a very repetitive way. And we're envisioning, 3 sessions a day, maybe for a period of 5 days across the week, with some time built in for rescheduling, weather, and those kinds of things. And of course, we also have to take into consideration the hottest part of the day. It's not fun being on the turf field at Franklin High School at 2 o'clock on July 13th. I can promise you that, on a 90-degree day. So we're taking all that into consideration. So we have a lot more to plan, but we've come a long way, and we're looking forward to it. And we really want to give the kids an opportunity to receive their diploma in the way that they deserve. So kudos to the high school staff for stepping up and spending the kind of time that they've spent on both the virtual program, which will be second to none. There's a whole virtual reality piece to the program, which is really cool. And that's a former graduate, a former Franklin High School, not a former graduate, a graduate or former Franklin High School.
Losing you a little, John. John, we're losing your connection.
Who has kudos to Mr. Pinnock and the entire job getting this all together. Our last day of school is June 23rd. We have many activities such as a field day, assessment days, and makeup days included in this phase, and that really came from the feedback that we've got from parents through our surveys. So thank you, parents, for continually helping us to craft a better program. The assessment days are going to be important. We're going to be in chunks, but we need to get a handle on where our students are if we want to take them where we want to go next year. So we're going to ask you to work with us in making sure that the assessments are carried out. And again, they'll be very manageable and very much to the point, giving us just the kind of information we need as we prepare for next year. And also kudos to Mr. Wilson, our Director of School Management, and many others. They put some fabulous plans in place, and thanks to the local Board of Health, thanks to Mr. Fornlocker and local police. They helped us to craft some really good plans that have us allowing kids to come back, drop things off in a very safe way. And we're only doing that with certain students and certain items. But this way we can get some of the materials that we need, safety first in mind, have been created and blessed by both the township and the director and her department. So we'll continue to work with them as we move forward. We'll continue to work with them with graduation. But that's kind of where we stand. And again, I can't say this enough. Thanks to everybody. Thanks to the township. Thanks to the mayor. Thanks to Mr. Bornlocker. Thanks to the director and her team of folks. You've been wonderful. You've been supportive. Thanks to our staff. Thanks to our community. Your input has been invaluable. As our Assistant Superintendent of Curriculum and Instruction, Mr. Logren, said, and I said this once before, you know, we were building this thing, as many of you were doing, we were building this thing as we were flying it. And that's never an easy task, but thanks to our passengers, we think we've got a pretty good, solid handle on it now. And we're gonna survey again. And this survey won't be about new learning, but it'll be about September learning, because we've put a group together that's representative of a lot of different stakeholders. And you know, those invites are going out now, and we're gonna start to work on a plan as to what September might look like. And then once we get guidance from the DOE, which we've yet to get, we'll tweak those plans according to the guidance. So that's all we have. Thanks, Mike, for the invite, and I'll hang out for questions.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Ravelli. I'm concerned I might have a connection issue on my end, but hopefully we're okay. Mr. Mayor, in case I do have any issues, I'm running a second laptop for questions from Facebook, but if I have any issues, when we get to that point, I might ask you to take them. But we'll move now. I think we got through our panel, right? So we're going to move now to, can you hear me?
All but me. Yes, I can hear you, but I am part of the panel. I did want to speak.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead. I'm having trouble. It's chopping up on my end, but go ahead.
As far as my COVID announcements, we had 2 new cases today for a total of 1,220 cases. We had no deaths, thank God. So our total remains at 119. For the last week, we've been averaging under 4 cases a day. We've gone, I think, 23 days with 10 or fewer cases. The pop-up center, as the Freeholder Director mentioned, did 73 people, 40 of which were from Franklin. I've spoken or I've written before about doubling time. That's the amount of time it would take to double the number of cases. That's an important epidemiologic number. It's now well over 6 months that it would take to do that, and we got here in under 3 months. So we're catching up on this thing, and that's good. But I'm gonna risk everything now and go to share screen.
I think the issue's on my end.
I wanted to show this table, and I'm sorry for being nerdy, but if you look at the graph, what you see is in blue, the population percentages for the various demographics, and in red, the number of deaths. This is from New Jersey, not for Franklin, from New Jersey. And you can see that that whites in our state have fewer deaths than their share. Hispanics have more deaths than their share. But look at the amount of disproportionate that African Americans have. And if you take that a little bit further, African Americans are 13% of the population, but they are the difference between, well, the number of deaths is 18%, 18.5%. That's a difference of 5.5%. 5.5% is 42% of the 13% of population. So in other words, a lot of numbers, a lot of talking there. Black deaths from COVID are 42% higher than we would expect them to be. And that's part of the inequity that Freeholder Director talked about that we are experiencing. Police is an issue. Policing is an issue, but it's more than that. It's banking, it's getting a loan, it's healthcare, it's so many things, so many parts of our society. And my biggest fear is that when we get a mass shooting, it's big news for 2 weeks and then it goes away. And when we have another African American killed, it's big news for 2 weeks and then it goes away. This can't go away. I'm afraid it will, because that's what happens every time, but we just can't let it. The Franklin Reporter had a fantastic interview today with Reverend Soares. It was today, wasn't it? I saw it on the video. And I watched it. I recommend people do watch it. He had 7 points of how to make things better. And the number one point at the end, PJ asked, what's the number one thing to do? And he just went to the top of the list. And I completely agree with that, is go to the places that are doing it right and find out how they're doing it right. And I want to take that one step further. I think we have a good police force. I really am proud of our police force, but I want to be one of those places that people go to see how to do it right. There you are, you jumped around the screen. Director Spruill, Faulkner Act prevents me from telling you what to do. So Mr. Manager, I'm asking you to tell Director Spruill that that's what I want, and I'm sure that's what the rest of the council wants. Let's be that place that people come to see how to do it right. And I think we're partly there. I think having Director Spruill gets us closer, but we will always have a distance to go, and we can't let this go away. I think that ends my comments. Take it away, Michael.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So we're going to move to press comments, or press questions rather. And for those entering on Facebook, if you can hold your questions until the press questions are completed, and then I'll take questions in order from the feed on Facebook. So why don't we go to the Franklin Reporter and Advocate. And Bill, will you be kicking off?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, go ahead.
I just wanted to, first of all, compliment and congratulate the mayor on his taste in podcasts. I think it's exceptional. But in seriousness, that really was, and not just because it was ours, but that really was an extraordinary conversation we had with Reverend Soares today. He drew upon his 30 plus years of activism to come up with a 7, like as the mayor said, a 7-plan agenda, he calls it, for eradicating, well, he put it genteelly, official misconduct by police forces. Other folks call it police brutality. And his ideas were good. A couple of them depend on legislation, and I don't know. He also acknowledged that it would be a heavy load to get not only state legislators to do something, but federal legislators. But I recommend you go to our Facebook page and take a look. It's a nice discussion. It's about an hour long, but it goes by very quickly. So thank you, Mayor, for that plug. I just had one question for the public safety director, and please don't take this as a criticism. I was just curious. A lot of, not a lot, but some of the protests that we've seen in different cities over the past week or so, we've seen police actually join in with the protesters in taking a knee. And today, you guys had the opportunity to do that because the protesters did take a knee for 8 minutes and 46 seconds, which was the time it took that officer to kill George Floyd. But you declined. I just wondered why you guys did not take a knee.
So to answer that, Colin Kaepernick took a knee during the national anthem, multiple times in protest of the injustices that occurred throughout our nation in regard to Black and brown individuals. A white uniformed police officer took a knee, took a life, and murdered George Floyd on the ground, on video, and I'll say before the nation. And I think it's hypocritical to now say it's okay for us to take a knee. The image of that officer killing an unarmed Black man, that's not what I want to portray of my officers on their knee. I understand the community's position. They did it in remembrance of, but it's not a, I would say it's not a sight that, oh, it's great for the cops to do this. No, what are those cops going to do when they stand up? That's what I want to know in those other towns. Yeah, it's symbolic. I get it, but it does not do anything for us. It doesn't. I think I'm insulted by it. Now you want to take a knee? Kaepernick took a knee and he couldn't get a job. So what is the meaning of it overall? We have work to do, like we keep saying, and I want to do that work. I do. It wasn't out of disrespect. My officers, they stood in silence. I talked to the individuals. All the individuals that questioned us about that, I told them the exact same thing, and they respected and they understood us for that. They did. And we took some heat initially because they didn't understand our point of view. But this is the United States, and we all have a position, and we all have an opinion, and we all feel something. And we are not that officer. And you notice I won't say his name because it doesn't deserve to be known. George Floyd did not deserve what he received in the 8-9 minutes. It's inhuman to kneel on someone that long. And one of the citizens that was standing by me initially that made it, an issue, he goes, 9 minutes is a long time. You believe this? I said, no, I don't. You're right. You're right. So that's why I took that position.
Okay. And just to follow up on what you were saying, I guess it was Monday in Asbury Park. There were a number of Asbury Park police officers who took a knee with the protesters, and several hours later, they were tackling them and arresting them. So, there you have it.
And let's remember, a lot of the officers they knelt in solidarity with the community. And you're right. Soon after that, they were battling each other.
Right.
What did that do for the community? It is hypocritical. No. We did not have any confrontations out there. Our officers, matter of fact, we went from being criticized about that briefly to helping individuals into the ambulance who had heat exhaustion.
Yeah.
And at work.
And you didn't mention this, but the folks who organized and some of the folks who spoke actually congratulated you. And I think you guys got a nice big round of applause at one point.
Absolutely. No, absolutely. And that is the type of relationship we want to continue to have with the public and the community. I think it's more urgent that we stay on top of this momentum. I applauded them too, because they are bringing out, notoriety in this. It's not just us by ourselves, it's the community. They want us to do better. They want us to treat them better. And that's what we must do. They are helping us get there. They are helping wake everyone up, because I think a lot of people are not aware of what can really happen outside in the streets. And, there's a difference between officers doing their jobs. I do not appreciate disrespect toward the officers because, I wasn't taught that growing up. You respect police, your teacher, and your reverend or your priest or whomever. Really, back in my day, it was all adults. You just would get in trouble for back talking anyone. But you definitely respect those people. They help you.
Okay. I'm going to cede the rest of my time to PJ. Got to unmute yourself, PJ.
There we go. I was just thinking, Director Sproul, that you just added a dimension to the need to with what you just said that I had not even entertained. It's interesting when Colin Kaepernick did that. It was received in one respect as a sign of protest about injustice, and for another aspect, received as a sign of total disrespect for the country that they're living in and enjoying their rights and freedoms. And then it has somehow now become just a symbol of protest and solidarity until your words just now. I cannot get the image of a knee in the neck of that man. I can't. I've had nightmares about it. It's just a whole different perspective. And I appreciate that you took the stand that you did today. I truly appreciate that. That had nothing to do with anything that I was about to say, but I did want to acknowledge that and thank you for adding that perspective.
No,
What I did, I'm sorry, go ahead.
no, I said thank you. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. What I did want to mention is the 2 Black Lives Matter marches. The one on Sunday began with maybe 5 or 10 people in the parking lot. All of a sudden it swelled. All of a sudden it grew. And all of a sudden there was a sea of people. And the solidarity in this march, which we also saw today, but the fervency of it on Sunday was, yes, we're angry. Yes, we want justice. Yes, we have to do things about it. But yes, we stand together to get it done. People were driving down Eastern Avenue and rolling down their windows and hanging signs out of their windows and cheering and supporting. And it was incredible. And I lived in New York. I've seen a lot of stuff. This was nothing like I have ever experienced. And I think it said a lot to the community about the community. Today was much the same thing. I think there were fewer participants, but its message was still of unity. What I wanted to make of that it does go back to the discussion we had today with Reverend Soyes. I did have occasion to speak with a couple of people and say, okay, what does this mean to you? What does justice mean to you? What justice are we talking about? And anyone I spoke with said, well, justice to me is equality for all. You're right. How are we getting there? What are we going to do? Are we going to just talk about it? Are we going to continue to have marches and protest about it? Or is there a plan? Are there concrete steps that we can take and will take? And again, hearkening back to Reverend Soyes, he outlined a 7-point program that I think has teeth and I think should be envisioned and embraced, certainly by our local government, but I hope it goes much, much farther than Franklin, because it's not just lip service anymore. People are dying. People are dying, and more people are going to die protesting the deaths. So I'm preaching to the choir. I get that. All right. My second commentary has to do with COVID and the fact that things are starting to open up and people are starting to get a little cavalier about the masks and the distancing. And now the testing has become so plentiful. My concern is I haven't heard a word about antibody testing. I haven't heard a word about repeat testing. There is not the impossibility of catching it again. It's a virus. You could be totally free of this, and 2 months later, you could contract it again because you weren't careful, because you didn't wash your hands, or you didn't wear your mask, or you didn't social distance, because now you think it's all over. Well, it's not all over. That great white shark is still out there. People can't go in the water yet totally. So I still have concerns. It was 92 degrees out today. Everybody had a mask on. And I commend the community for doing that. It's miserable. I hate wearing the stupid mask. But I gotta, because I wear it for you. You wear it for me. And that's the bottom line. And until this is a resultant number of zero cases, 0 deaths across the board, we still have a great white shark out there. And I think we need to be respectful of that. So that's my commentary.
Michael, you're muted.
Again, apologies. Malik, we're moving to Malik Lyons from Tappan to Franklin. Any questions you have for the panel?
Sure. I consider, thank you, Michael. I consider everyone on the panel a leader in our community. So I think it would be kind of helpful if anyone would be willing or open to share any kind of private conversations or things that you say with your friends, people that you say to your family, things that you would say to your family, kind of along the lines of, what do you tell them to fight injustice as far as it's concerned with racism, and especially institutionalized racism, because some of you work in these different facilities. What are some of those conversations you have with your people, your friends, that you say, or like you could just give like one or two things that you think would go a long way to even say to the public, so that they could start having those type of conversations, or they could start having those type of like thoughts?
You have to put in the work. You can't sit by idly and complain and talk about what's being done or not being done. You have to be part of that solution. One is you got to get out and vote. A lot of people think that, look what happened almost 4 years ago. You still got to get out and vote. You need to attend meetings, whether it's council meeting, boards and commissions meetings. Stay engaged, stay focused. A lot of things out there are distractions and take away from the work that needs to be done. And you get you so riled up emotionally that you lose focus on the work that has to be done. And so voting is a privilege and a right. People say it's one or the other. But there are so many other people before us. 100 years ago, women didn't have a right to vote. So if you want to see changes legislatively or in government, you need to vote. You need to put your money where your mouth is. Get out there and do the work. You can't do it all. You can't be everywhere, but do something. If you're a subject matter expert in finance, then help with financial literacy. Give back to the community. If it's education, then offer some type of added support for students who may fall through the gaps. If it means supporting a single parent and getting their kids to after school, as the 2-year-old comes in, and getting the support that they need from an educational standpoint. Giving somebody a helping hand and a second chance. How many people of color are incarcerated, and then when they come out, the support is not there? It's there as a window dressing, but they do not get the total support that they need. People of color, we suffer just as much as any other race or ethnic group with mental illnesses, but because of the lack of health care, it's not being diagnosed or recognized. And for people of color, set your pride aside. We don't like to ask for help, and that's been ingrained. Start asking for help. The help is there. We need to take advantage of the resources that are available to us. And those of us that are in government, we need to make sure that we get the word out. We have a responsibility to our communities. We have a responsibility, and for me as a leader, you have to be a leader for all people at all times. So I've been on the receiving end of race baiting, and I said this before early in the week, but that did not stop me from doing what I know was the right thing to do. So I had to stay focused. And so I'm not gonna let the distractions get me off course. I'm stronger than that. I'm better than that because of who I am and where I come from. And I don't necessarily have to convince or change other people's minds. And I think everybody should be proud of their race. But when it's steeped in bigotry and hatred, it has to stop. We have to speak out against it. And so what I will continue to do is speak up, speak out, and stay focused. Again, these things come as a distraction to get you off course.
Mm-hmm.
I'm better than that. It's a small thing to a giant. And we as a people of color, we are giants.
Okay, Congresswoman Pruitt, you're unmuted. Did you want to speak?
Well, thank you for upgrading me to Congresswoman.
Good promotion.
Congresswoman, I have high hopes for you.
Oh,
Councilwoman, apologies.
congratulations.
Oh, no need to apologize. Speak that into existence.
Hey,
20, what, 22, 24?
No, I mean, to Malik's question, obviously the things that I say to my friends are probably a little bit more colorful in their language, but to clean it up would be, especially, so, I mean, and recently as, I guess, a leader, I've been getting a lot of these questions. And it's something I always struggle with because as a leader, you know, I am a leader, but I'm also an African-American woman trying to deal with the trauma. So it's always really hard to kind of balance, and it depends on the relationship whether or not, you know, I give that advice. But one of the things I always mention is just like, it's not necessarily up to the oppressed to teach the oppressor, like how to treat someone with humanity, right? Like it's a really hard thing to try and ask someone who's currently suffering to do. But my biggest thing is, you know, a lot of what the freeholder director said, but a lot of it's also, it's like, what are you doing to educate yourself? Like, what books are you reading? Like, are you getting out of your I guess, social media circle? And when you are reading and you are researching and you're reading books, like, are you checking the veracity of the information in there? A lot of it comes from just not willing to take that extra step to learn how to be anti-racist, because a lot of people lean on, oh, well, I'm not racist. It's not good enough not to be racist. You are either, it's really a dichotomy. You either are or you aren't. And if you aren't, you are actively working to not be racist. And that means calling out microaggressions and racism and other isms in your circles, in your workplace. It's one thing, and a lot of corporations have been doing this, it's one thing to put out a really, really nice statement about Black Lives Matter if your entire board of directors are white. It was like, what are you doing to actually make this cultural change? As, you know, freeholder director mentioned, I'm sure Pastor Stories may have mentioned, to kind of really tackle and start to dismantle the power structure that has created the situations that we're living through now. This isn't an accident. People aren't dying by accident. This was made because this is institutionalized. This is systemic. So it's in your own wheelhouse. What are you doing to call out those issues? And it's uncomfortable, and, you know, it takes practice, and you might fail, and sometimes you may need to ask for help and assistance and guidance. But what I tell my friends and my colleagues is that you have to be willing to put your neck on the line. You're gonna have to be willing to read and put yourself in uncomfortable situations, because it's one thing for me to come out and be like, racism exists, but if I'm not the right messenger, the people that need to hear and understand that aren't gonna hear it. So it's, I need, you know, people who don't necessarily look like me to embody that message and take it with them so they can correct it in the rooms and the spaces that I'm not allowed in yet. So that's usually my spiel. It's just, I will lead you to the promised land, but you actually have to dig up the dirt and figure out what you need to do. And you need to plant the seeds and tend to the ground, because I'm trying to do my own work too, and just trying to protect myself and educate other people. But I think it's really important that, you know, you listen to Black and brown communities, because we'll tell you the truth. We've been saying this for years. It wasn't until cameras started picking it up that people really started believing it. So listen to Black and brown people. Read, learn how to be anti-racist, make yourself uncomfortable. So that's usually my lighthearted conversation I have with my friends on race.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Is there any, to Malik's questions, is there anyone else who wanted to, from the panel, that wanted to comment? Or
So,
Malik, do you have another
Yes,
question?
I have a comment.
Doctor, hold on, PJ, if you don't mind.
Okay.
Dr. Ravalli, go ahead. And if you could
Oh,
all,
sure.
yep, thank you.
You're
Go ahead,
welcome.
Dr.
I just want to piggyback on what Councilwoman, or maybe future Congresswoman, who knows, Pruitt mentioned. equity work takes courage. And I think that's where she was heading with that, is equity work takes courage, or at least that's where I'd like to head with that. And that's a conversation that we often have. It takes courage, and for some, the conversations are harder than for others. And the conversations can be difficult for some. But if we commit to the conversations and we listen to the dialogue, then we can really make the change that everyone's seeking. And, you know, it's that courage that we're all going to need. And it's courage that we're going to have to rely on to have those conversations, listen to the voice of our students, listen to the voice of our friends, listen to the voices of Black and brown neighbors, and carry those conversations on, learn from them, and then act on what we learn. And I think it's you know, the word courage that we often talk about when we have our conversations.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Valley. Director Sproul?
Mayor Kramer had something to say.
Oh,
Yep, oh, sorry, whoever wants to go first.
did you have something?
Go ahead, Mayor.
We'll go to the mayor and then to Director Sproul.
So my first thing is actually a question. Freeholder Director, how do you do it? Not only are you Freeholder Director and have a job, but you're taking care of a 2-year-old.
That's President Robinson to you.
Yeah, thank you.
It's getting you all used to the titles.
It just do it. It has to be done. And I can't sleep until it's done. It just has to be done. I can't complain about it. Military trained me.
You are an inspiration. So I've had 2 conversations that are diametrically opposed, and one of them was that I've already expressed was my fear that this is going to go away like it's gone away so many times. But the opposite part of it is, so my generation, you know, I grew up with my generation protesting against the Vietnam War. And my generation often spoke of the following generations of what is wrong with the youth? Why are they not standing up for anything? Because that was some real protesting that went on then. But today, I saw, and that was primarily a young group at today's protest, I saw that. I saw what I saw during the Vietnam War. And that kind of encourages me, maybe this won't go away this time. And that's the conversation I've had. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Director Sproul?
So I was just going to add to what everyone else said. And I think as leaders, we all have the same image in our minds about, you know, what equality looks like, and, you know, what we should tell our friends about what we do, especially being a public servant. But I think my smaller group here at home, my son and my daughter, it's amazing to me. My daughter's 14. And her birthday's a weird time of the year. It's in November. So last summer she came to me, she goes, you know, I won't be able to vote in the primary, but I can vote. And I'm like, what are you talking about voting? She said, you know, because my birthday, I turned 18 November 7th. And then I see down the line, it's not until this. And I'm like, and what year is that? And she's like, I don't know, like 2030. I'm like, you know, but I've instilled it in them that they know when they turn 18, they should vote. They know they're going to drive. They know they want to go to college. And I think it comes from, you know, constantly talking to them. And we have to constantly talk to our children, I talk to their friends. They don't like me to talk to their friends, but talk to their friends. When I have their peers in my earshot, they're in a car, I'm driving them somewhere, you know, I'm talking to them about interactions with police and different things. And, you know, if I can go there, any topic that I think is pertinent at the time. But, you know, it's important that we also talk to our youth that's around us and in our earshot and in our families and our groups.
You're still muted, Michael.
Muted, Michael.
PJ had something.
Yeah, I did.
Yep.
Is it my turn?
Yeah, actually, those are questions for the panel, PJ. Just for time, I'm going to have to move to questions from the feed. We're already an hour in, so I apologize. But if you all want to take questions I've now.
This isn't a question, it's a comment.
Yeah, I understand, PJ.
Okay.
Mike.
I already asked for questions from the feed. Go ahead. Did you want to speak?
I just wanted to say something. You know, it was interesting as I listened to everyone, at last, Director Sproul mentioned her children. As I sat here and my son walked in to the kitchen, and I thought to myself, I think that Malik asked, you know, what do you tell people? I think of what I told my two sons, who are now a little bit older than Director Sproul's kids. And I told them, you know, always do what is right, no matter who is listening, no matter who is watching, and even if no one is listening and no one is watching. And you need to instill in your children the knowledge that if they see something wrong, they should correct it and not just let it happen, because for so long we have just let it happen, and we can't do that anymore, and we should never have done it. And I think I instilled that in my children just the way my parents instilled it in me. When you hear it or you see it, correct it and live your life the right way, like a good person, and don't allow yourself to fall into those traps. So I think that's the advice that you give children, and as adults, you see the fruits of your labor, and that would be my advice.
Okay, thank you, Township Manager. We have a lot of questions flooding in, so I'm going to give them to the panel and have you all field them as appropriate. First question is question of whether or not Franklin is an MBK community, and if not, could this be helpful in becoming a community that others look to? And if you're not familiar with that term, then I'm trying to find it myself. But I'm going to suspect that this will be something that we would answer at a future meeting.
My Brother's Keeper community.
My Brother's Keeper community, launched by President Obama in 2014, nearly 250 communities in all 50 states, Puerto Rico, and DC. Answer the call to action to address persistent opportunity gaps facing boys and young men of color. So yes. So if you, does anybody want to field that?
That's me. I think that's me, Michael.
Sure.
It's, I don't know who asked that question, but in doing our community policing portion in the police department, we are exploring starting a Central Jersey, My Brother's Keeper. So it's for young men. It's for young men growing up, and President Obama began the program. I know the gist of it. I know it's like a mentorship program. I don't know the ins and outs exactly, but I know that my community policing staff is interested in doing that. It's so funny. We just talked about that last week during one of our meetings. So we're looking at being one. Right now, the only one is in Newark, I believe, in the Newark, Essex County area.
Okay, so I'm going to stay with you, Director, and I don't know if Township Manager wants to weigh in also, but there's a listener that wants to kind of have a breakdown summary of what the use of force policies are that are in place with Franklin Township Police, specifically policies around de-escalation maneuvers that may cut off oxygen or blood flow, such as chokeholds, duty to intervene, shooting at moving vehicles, these types of things. I can read, there's quite an extensive list that they pasted in here. But is there some kind of summary information that you can provide?
Michael, that question, and it's ironic that as I sit here reading my email, and so did Director Sproul, get another email with all of those exact same questions. I think there is probably something available online that tells the different things for people to question their police department about. And I know Director Sproul has formulated a fantastic response detailing all of that information. So I'll let her do it, but I think that I'm also going to suggest at this time that perhaps her response that has gone out a number of times now be posted on the township's website.
Right, and it's quite extensive.
It is.
So is there, it might be better that, I mean, if there's some sort of summary answer, Director, but if there is a place or a resource or maybe some way to provide answers to these questions that we have recorded in the comments?
So, and just briefly, and I can't sum it up shorter than my email, let's say that. So the use of force policy is directed by the Attorney General guidelines, and that is posted on the New Jersey Attorney General guidelines and directives website. So you can see the use of force guidelines. To ask the question about chokeholds and carotid artery, blood restriction techniques and things like that, those are not done in New Jersey. Kneeling on someone's neck, that is not allowed in New Jersey. That's not a technique that is trained, or taught to our officers in the police academy. So I forgot the other loaded questions within there, but I'm more than willing if that person can inbox Jessica, someone, and provide the answers to the whole list.
Okay, so we'll make sure those are emailed to you, Director, and I can pull them from the feed.
And I'll eventually post them up on, her answer up on my Facebook page.
Okay.
Sure. So you all coordinate to do that, Mr. Mayor? But we'll get the questions over to you. Okay, great. And I'm going to pull a question that was submitted by email. That's another one of the ways that people can submit questions. There's a question by asking about restaurants and something that Somerville is doing in terms of sort of opening street space to extend the seating area that restaurants can use to increase their ability to serve customers and in keeping with COVID rules. Any thoughts on Franklin for that in any place?
We've already done it at our last council meeting. We passed a resolution allowing for that. The manager would have details.
So what Somerville is proposing to do, which will require state approval, is to actually close Main Street, which is State Highway 28 in Somerville. And I don't know whether or not that approval has been granted, but Somerville, with probably 30 or more restaurants along their Main Street, is in a far different place than Franklin Township. While we have several on Hamilton Street, we certainly don't have anywhere near the number that Somerville does. And our restaurants tend to be either standalone restaurants, such as the Stage House or Tap House 2020, or they're in strip malls that have parking lots. And so what we chose to do was to relax all of our restrictions on outdoor dining and allow those restaurants to encroach out into parking lots or lawns or what have you to allow for that outside dining. While I think it's a fantastic idea for a town like Somerville because of the way that Somerville is laid out and the very classic Main Street environment, Franklin Township really doesn't set itself up for that, and we certainly can't close Easton Avenue. Or Route 27, which are major thoroughfares. And I believe what Somerville's looking to do is, I think it's Friday and Saturday nights, or maybe perhaps Thursday, Friday, and Saturday night for a brief period of time, 6 to 9 or 6 to 10. I did look into it a little bit, but we're going to try to work as best we can in our way to serve our restaurants in the best way possible. And hopefully we'll be successful.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to give you another one, Manager. When will the township resume occupied home inspections?
So a lot of our guidance is coming from the state of New Jersey. We've followed the directives of the governor through his executive orders. I think that some of us may not look at it right now, but the stay-at-home executive order is still in effect. In fact, the stay-at-home order is still in effect. For those who can work from home, must work from home order is still in effect. And as those restrictions loosen, we'll have an opportunity to look at things like occupied in-home inspections. But I will tell you that our construction department has been very creative when certain inspections needed to be done in an occupied home. If there was a licensed contractor that was doing the work, they were able to, via Skype or FaceTime, through photographs, take pictures and live stream of the work that was done so that the work could continue with approvals that were done remotely. So there has been that done a number of times. It just needs to be worked out with the construction officials.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Ravalli, I'm going to pass a question to you. There's a question regarding whether or not any parent volunteers will be needed in any capacity for graduation ceremonies.
You're muted.
Oh, geez.
No, he isn't. No, you're fine. My mistake.
Oh,
Everyone's fine.
okay. That's,
Overactive mayor.
I wasn't quick enough.
you always have my back, Mr. Mayor. Go ahead,
I wasn't
Dr.
quick
Ravalli.
enough.
Yeah.
Yeah, no worries. Although we appreciate the offer, obviously we're going to be very limited in the amount of people that we have. Everyone will count. So rather than having volunteers, we're going to rely on the folks that are coming, the parents, the students, to help us to organize themselves. And we're going to have it very well laid out. And, you know, we'll have our own staff and you know, the limited amount of staff that we need, because otherwise it'll take away from the number of graduates, the number of parents we can have. So although we appreciate the offer, we don't envision the need for volunteer help.
Okay, thank you. And here's another one for you, Dr. Ravalli. Do you happen to know when they will be having kindergarten orientation, since they were supposed to have it at the end of May?
Yes, and I apologize if that hasn't been communicated out yet. We are looking to do something, obviously, but it'll be closer to September. We're hoping that we're able by then to do some kind of in-person, albeit it might be in smaller groups, but we think it's important to have it, you know, more of an in-person kind of program than just a virtual program. So we're hopeful that closer to the beginning or start of the new school year, we're going to be able to do something. Traditionally, that's correct. We normally do it at the end of the school year in May, but given the circumstances, we're just not able to. So hopefully that will happen to the beginning of September, and likely it'll be in smaller groups if that's what's necessary. But more information will come out directly from the building principals on that in the very near future.
Okay, there's another question. I'm not sure I'm entirely clear on the context, but it's asking if you're aware of a student petition that's been circulated with Franklin High School students about making race, gender, and ethnicity mandatory, not mandatory where, I'm not sure, and if you had been approached by students or if Principal Schmiel had. I don't know if...
Well, I know Mr. Schmiel has spoken with students recently. He had a very long conference call with students to gain information, and I don't know if they talked about this race, gender, and ethnicity course in particular, but we already have a race.
Oh, so it's a course. Okay.
Yeah, we have a course at the high school called Race, Gender, and Ethnicity.
I got you.
It's not a mandatory course.
Right.
It's a sophomore, junior, and senior level elective course. But I'm not familiar with the content of the petition. You know, maybe there's some confusion as to whether we even have the course or not, or maybe there's some confusion as to whether it's mandatory or not. But we will certainly follow up, and I thank whoever wrote that in. But we do have a course called.
Yeah, I do have a copy of the petition. It was sent to me earlier today, and they're part of the petition. I'll just read a portion of it. Is making it a requirement.
There you go.
And yes. Part of, and I'm just in part, is saying, just get to the part that finance is required, gym or physical education is required for 4 years to the health and wellness of a student, and that they're part of, and in part, the race, gender, and equity should be a requirement for graduation. Personal finance is considered mandatory because students need economic proficiency to survive. Well, we can't survive in a world where hate drives people to murder in the name of racism. And that's just in part.
Right. Yes, it's an elective course right now, but we can certainly have those conversations. We're allowed to set policy. I mean, obviously, phys ed, personal finance, those are all legislative requirements. They're regulated requirements rather. They come from the State Department of Education. They're required courses as part of the graduation requirements. We certainly can talk with our students, and we would have no problem lobbying for that. It's a very popular course, I might add, and it's an excellent course. And certainly it would be a great course to have statewide. So the legislators that are listening, it would be something good for you to pick up on. And you can certainly borrow the curriculum and see how wonderful the course is. But we can talk about it locally as a mandatory course. That's certainly not an issue. That would just require the board and I to work to amend the graduation policy, making it a local decision. But I think what I'm hearing there is it sounds like this particular student, and rightfully so, maybe wants to see this very popular course in our high school spread out throughout the state. And that's something we can certainly talk about and lend our experiences to the rest of the state and or State Board of Education if they're interested in hearing.
Well, the State Board of Education also has the Amistad Commission that is working to integrate that level of history, especially African American history, into curriculum across the state. So it might not be to the specificity of what was written in that, but there is something going on the state level and a push to make that part of our history properly disseminated and educated to students. So as not a state legislator, but just knows one.
Not yet. Mr. Mayor, or I don't know if this is something you would want to address, or perhaps Township Manager Vornlocker, but just the status of the census for us in Franklin Township and any efforts to increase the response to the census.
Yeah, I would have to, look at that. So we're divided into 12 different census tracts, and skimming this quickly, we're, as I recall, around the 64th percent of what is expected of us. I have a map I put up on my Facebook page about a week ago. I'll put an updated one up tomorrow if I can remember. The biggest concern is in the northeast corner of the town that kind of borders New Brunswick, and then going down Route 27 until you get to Kendall Park. Kendall Park's doing okay, but that whole eastern edge there, we do need some work on. At the freeholder meeting, we did. There was a person on that helped us, that discussed that a bit. I've made sure she's in touch with our clerk, who's kind of the person in charge of our census, and we're going to be pushing hard in those tracks that are a bit behind.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Ravalli, there's an email question, came in late, but it was refers and uses their statistic that 14% of students enrolled in Franklin are classified in special education, and are, basically they're asking, with the remote learning, what kind of efforts are being made to ensure that they're getting, appropriate education.
Am I unmuted?
You are unmuted now.
Excellent, thank you. So it's actually classification rate's a little higher. It's about 16%. And we have our special education teachers, our case managers. We have folks working with our learning modules to ensure that they are meeting the IEP needs of students. And we also have case managers reaching out to parents, and we're doing the best we can in a remote environment to support parents, especially all parents, but especially our parents that have students with special needs. We are and have, and I know Dr. Sofield and her team held a very popular parent forum evening, and that was well received, and there were lots of very good questions and lots of good support. We had folks available at that meeting to support parents from a technological standpoint. So we have lots of things happening, but trust me, I realize this is not the optimum environment for any parent and for any kid. This is not how learning was traditionally designed. So I'm not to say that it's hasn't taught us a few things, but we would much rather be able to have some face-to-face contact with our kids, and that's what we're hoping for. But we are doing what we can. And like I said, we'll continue to do some of those things. And Dr. Sofield is preparing to offer our extended school year program in a hybrid format, if allowable, come beginning of July.
Okay, thank you. Director Sproul, and there's a question about, or an observation on the part of the submitter that traffic is down in Franklin, but that their observation is that speeding and perhaps careless driving is up, and whether or not there are any, if you concur with that assessment, and anything that the police department is doing to address it, including how they're handling citations.
So our officers have been on a modified COVID schedule so that we can minimize contact between the officers, and when they are out there and they're working, they come back and they kind of have 14 days to, see if they, were contaminated. But they are back June 7th. So that is what I'm saying. We are back full staff June 7th. My vehicle is a low profile vehicle, a normal vehicle, like regular citizens. And I have noticed that as well. So it is on our radar, trust me.
So to speak.
No pun intended.
I want to add to that, because and the mayor knows this. So since this pandemic started, I have come into the office every day, and I'm often in and out on the road as early as 6 o'clock in the morning before I go into the office, and I tend to go around Franklin a lot more than during normal business times in my time as township manager, and it is true that what that commenter said is true. With far less cars on the road, you would think that people would be more courteous because there's no reason, there's no traffic jams. But the truth is that I've seen some pretty aggressive things. And the director and I have spoken about it. I've also spoken with the traffic officers directly. I anticipate that if we continue to see this for a period of time with less traffic on the road, and we move back into the normal schedule for our police officers, perhaps there might be an increase in our motor vehicle summonses for a short period of time until the public realizes that they can't drive that way.
There was a second question tagged onto that, which was asking, so during this period, is there still a net decrease, or is there a net increase in citations?
Definitely a decrease.
Yeah. Okay.
But there were less people on the road also.
So it's relative. Got it. Okay. There's a question here for Councilwoman Pruitt. Somebody had seen a interview with, I think, the Franklin Reporter and Advocate, and they're quoting you as saying that you were only concerned about the relationship between the police department and community, and that can you explain why this topic is the only issue that you're concerned with in our town? And I think what they're really asking is for you to expand on what you meant by that, and so there's no misinterpretation.
Yeah, so I care about a lot of things, but there are 9 people on the council, and we all kind of have wheelhouses. And with my background in forensic psychology, criminology, I used to work in the 1st Judicial District of Philadelphia. I've done crisis intervention training for the Philadelphia Police Department when I was working down there. So police community relations is something that's really, really personal and professionally close to me. So, building on the relationship between the police and our community is pretty much what my primary focus is. Isn't to say that I don't care about a lot of other things, but as we kind of look at the work and divvy up, you know, issue areas, that naturally became mine. So yeah, so I would say that ensuring that we are supporting our police director and our officers to be the best that they can be, that we are listening to our residents and we are being responsive to any complaints or concerns they have about their interactions. That's really important to me. It's really important to all of us on the council, but for me, I really, really, really care about that. So that's what I meant. I mean, I don't know how, I mean, I don't know really how else you interpret that.
No, I completely agree with her. We all have our specialties that we gravitate to. I
Yeah.
gravitate towards finance, open government, and obviously COVID-19, which was never something I planned to do. But no, she's an all-around congresswoman, but she has her specialty and the knowledge to vote to that.
So yeah, thank you, Mayor. So that's what I meant. Like, please do not try and misinterpret it that that's the only thing. I care about a lot of issues across the state, but I mean, not the, well, see, now I am a congresswoman, but a lot of the township, but yeah, for me, that's my wheelhouse.
Okay, so we're at 90 minutes, and with your permission, Mr. Mayor, there's just a couple more questions, and does that sound about right to you? And then we can wrap up. You know, we tried to do our best to answer all questions from all sources. I'll ask this, and the wordings, I'm going to leave you all to interpret it. But how are we verbally addressing some of the terms like Black Lives Matter, police brutality, racism, injustice, and systemic? If we aren't, can we commit to feeling comfortable speaking these typically avoided words for the sake of change? And thank you for your service. So I don't know if that's, yeah, I mean, there is a question in there. You all,
I think that
you all think there's an evolution in the comfort of people using terms that typically went unspoken?
I think everyone tonight just
For
used
some
all of
people.
those terms. I don't think anyone on this panel is uncomfortable, and I think everyone needs to be comfortable using all of those terms so that we're open and honest with each other about what needs to be done and what's happened in the past. You can't live your life with your head in the sand, and all of those words and all of those things are real. They're not. It's, you know, it's not a fantasy. It's the world that we lived in that we would like to change. And so, yeah, no, you can't ignore those words.
Okay.
Right. I agree.
Yep.
Someone said to me, Black Lives Matter. Oh, that group, they already did something. And I had to say, Black Lives Matter is not a group. It's a movement. It's a movement. There's not an organization you go sign up, I'm part of Black Lives Matter. So I think based upon what's been happening in our nation, in our county, in our city, I think people are getting comfortable with using and recognizing those words for what they are.
Okay. So what I'd like to do, there was a couple questions, and there were a couple things that some of our panelists said about what we aspire to be, what we want to be. I think Mr. Mayor talked about you wanting to be one of these places that, you know, that people, you know, other communities and people look to for examples of how to get it right or do it right. So there's some questions about what that vision, you know, kind of means in more tangible terms. And I thought if there were panelists wanted to just share briefly, what is that vision? What are the kind of what are the key aspects of a vision for a community you all want to see for Franklin as a model for others?
That's a broad question, but
It is.
You know, I think I'll go back to Reverend Soares' interview, which you know, I'm sorry, Malik, that I'm plugging your competitor there, but it really is, even if you think that this whole thing is ridiculous, and I'm sorry for you if you do, that interview, I think, will be revealing to you. And one of the things he talked about was a culture, changing the culture on the police force. And I'm not talking Franklin in particular, changing the culture of policing, where the culture is, if you see someone doing something wrong, that you feel empowered and committed and obligated to stop it, to report it. I think you put that together with training, and maybe you've solved everything together. I'm probably overemphasizing, but that would be a huge thing. And I'm not saying our police don't do that. I know of our police doing that at times. But that kind of thing, if you can ingrain in people in general that culture, and what Mr. Vornlocker said about his son, do the right thing. Just do the right thing. If we can get that moving forward, that would be huge.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor. You're unmuted, Dr. Ravalli. Did you want to comment?
I probably never muted, but I certainly could.
Well, then go for it.
I could certainly piggyback on what the
you're
mayor said. Culture is 100% what's most important in our schools as well. We have to focus on the culture. We have to look at our data. We have to disaggregate our data. We have to answer the tough questions. Why are African American males being suspended at higher rates, and what types of interventions do we need, or what types of cultural changes do we need to make a difference in those numbers? Why are African American males being identified as students who need special needs? Why are our AP numbers still not representative of our total school population? And although we've made headway and we've come closer to what that representation should be, why are certain students still underrepresented? And we're digging in. We're going to continue to dig in. We're going to have those tough conversations. We're going to ask those difficult questions of our staff, and we're going to rely on our data, and we're going to change. We're going to continue to change the culture in our schools to make them more accepting and inviting and supportive for all of our students.
Thank you, Dr. Ravalli. Any panelists want to comment or have any things they wanted to share about their vision for Franklin? So, Mr. Mayor, I turn to you to bring us to a close.
Okay, well, first I would like to thank Michael and Jessica. Michael for again making this happen, Jessica for her commentary and her support. Then I'd like to thank the top of the screen here, at least my top of the screen, with the exception of me, the director, the superintendent, councilwoman, the freeholder director, and the manager. I mean, this is really a super team. I got to tell you, it's now gone down to every other week. I get on these conference calls with the governor's office, and we hear of these other counties, and it's like, do they have any direction? The questions they're asking and so she's really been the director of the freeholder and the county. And the support and knowledge of Councilwoman Pruitt is, as we talked about, our expertise, it's there, and it's there for us. Mr. Ravalli is just, I've said it before, the word super for superintendent is completely appropriate for him. I have no worries about our schools. And I go to him to say, hey, what do you think about what we're doing? Because he's so on top of it. Director Spruill, you have had the month the first month that I think will set a record for any first month. But you've been there. You've been right there, right, as if you had been here for 10 years. So that's amazing. And again, the manager, he's driving around at 6 in the morning because he's up at 4 in the morning thinking about what else can I do for the town. But that's okay because he got to bed at 3 in the morning because he was thinking about what else I can do for the town. So this is a great team we have. As I mentioned before, we can do better. We will do better, but we got a great team going. I think it's appropriate though that we've had 119 people die in our town. That's a heavy load, and I think if we can have a moment of silence for that. Okay, thank you, Michael. I never knew how important it was when I first started saying it, but that's it for tonight. Be well, Franklin.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good night.
Good night.